and families in adhering to the protocols and guidelines. And although Campbell River School District did have school exposures, we did not have any confirmed transmission of COVID within the school setting. And so I want to assure our parents and community, as well as our trustees, that our school district is directly aligned with the public health guidelines as reflected in the Ministry of Education's K-12 protocol document. We have continued to rely on the public health system and the experts within it to determine appropriate school-based protocols in responding to the pandemic. And while we acknowledge that personal opinions may vary, we have and will continue to take action implementing the protocols specified by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. With that in mind, it is also important to acknowledge that this is now the third school year that we are in that's been impacted fundamentally by COVID. And since this is the 2nd September, I wanted to share just a couple of the things that we have learned as we've adapted to the changes required with the pandemic that I think will be important as in terms of guiding and continuing to guide the district. So one of the things that I reflected on is that right from the very initial response in March of 2020, when our schools needed to be closed and students were at home, right from the very beginning, our school district emphasized the personal connection with students and families. And we see the need to continue to connect with students and families in unique ways and find new ways to partner. And I know that this has been a guiding component of how we've responded to COVID, but it also needs to continue to guide our work as we respond to changes that are needed in education. We also saw an incredibly large system that is notorious for being slow to change, make rapid, significant changes. We saw an increase in schools' flexibility and knowledge that we need to find new ways to meet individual needs of students and their families. We worked really hard to find new ways to meet the needs of kids, not having kids meet the needs of our system. And for sure, one of the things that was played out over and over was the reinforcement and the deeper understanding of how essential schools are as a fabric in our society. And so as we think about some of those learnings and some of the things that we can take into this school year, I want to just share that I believe we have incredible reasons to be excited and optimistic about the learning that is going to happen on behalf of the students in our care this year. I have genuine hope and optimism, and I think as we have learned to respond to the pandemic, there is a confidence that we are going to be responding differently as well to the individual needs within our system. I also think it's important to reflect back to 2019 when this board developed our current strategic plan. And this strategic plan is intended to guide the work of staff through the goals and objectives set by trustees. And although in 2019 there was no knowledge of an upcoming pandemic or other global world events, it is important to look at those goals, remind the public of what those goals are because we're accountable to them, and to look at the relevance for the circumstances that we're currently in. And so the three goals that were articulated in the board's strategic plan was improving student achievement, building a culture of learning and wellness, and honoring Indigenous worldviews and perspectives. So with those three goals, I want to share three key goals for this upcoming school year. And the first one is we are committed to a continued emphasis on safety. But I want to expand our conversation about safety away from just the physical safety and the needs that COVID has presented, and to think about and to reflect on the psychological and emotional safety of each of the youth in our care. When I think about all of the things we have been willing to do on behalf of the physical needs of our students, we've seen changes to start and end times, we've seen radical shifts to the secondary timetable, we've seen increased flexibility and innovative programming, to name just a few of the things we're willing to do. And so my question for us that we need to answer as a system and individually as staff is, what does our school system look like? If we take with the same intensity that we've had and the willingness to shift things for the physical safety and well-being of our kids, to the psychological and emotional well-being of our kids. Because we know that this isn't just a pandemic of COVID, there is also a pandemic of child and youth mental health. So I picture, not just staff meeting kids at the door with hand sanitizer, but a welcome and I'm glad you're here, and really seeing each of those students in our care. So the board's goal, strategic goal of building a culture of learning and wellness, that goal, which we identified as a need prior to COVID, has been amplified through this crisis. And so that piece around mental health, we have developed, staff have developed a mental health framework over the last year that will help guide and support staff in the necessary work around child and youth mental health. But it needs to be, and I think that piece around thinking about safety for the whole child. And when I think of that, part of safety is coming to a classroom that is engaging, that is challenging, and that is supportive. And I think that's the exciting piece, because that's what we're offering to children and families. We have been working hard to bring to life the board's strategic goal around improving literacy, and I know it's very timely to speak of literacy, with tomorrow being International Day of Literacy, and so I would encourage you to wear purple. I believe that is part of the promotion of that, and part of the promotion of International Literacy Day is actually the recognition that literacy is fundamental to life chances. It's not just about success at school. And so I'm excited to share that this is the first year where we are introducing a comprehensive and unified implementation of a literacy framework, which will provide universal screening for students in kindergarten to grade 3 to help guide literacy instruction, to help us focus our interventions, and to appropriately allocate resources. And lastly, as we consider the goal around increasing Indigenous worldviews and perspectives, there is a deep commitment, and we're seeing it expressed across the system to see equity and to ensure that we have equal access for all students to the opportunities that are in our system. And we are moving into that space of being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations that are necessary in order to lead to specific action. And so finally, I think I would just like to thank our parents in our community for trusting us with their children. It is a tremendous honor and privilege to work and learn alongside them, and we really are looking forward to an amazing year of learning.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. We'll move on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes. And the suggested motion is that minutes of the meeting of June 15, 2021 are hereby approved as circulated and moved by Trustee Franklin, seconded by Trustee Hayden. Is there any discussion on this item? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Okay. The motion is carried. We'll move on to item 4. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Hearing none. Item 5, then, are there any additions or alterations to the agenda? Trustee Hayden.
Yes, I would like to sort of small clarification on the elected board matters with regards to newspaper articles and notes.
All right. I'll put that down as 12A. Trustee McMahon.
Yes, I'm wondering if we could put the update on the student leadership meeting on this agenda, please.
Okay, student leadership. Okay, are there any other additions or alterations to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Trustee Franklin, Trustee Hayden, the suggested motion is that the agenda is hereby approved as amended. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None? Okay, the motion is carried. Move to item number 7, and that's the report of board decisions from the September 7th, 2021 confidential board meeting. Vice Chair Eddie.
the confidential board meeting today, we were discussing legal and staffing issues. We are not quite through our agenda and we'll be returning after the closed meeting.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8. There's a correspondence. We don't have public submissions or agenda submissions. So we move on to item 11A, which is the physical literacy, and that's Georgina Knox and Morgan Kyle.
Thank you, Trustee Kerr. I'm going to take a moment because you really want to hear from this fabulous educator. We've been talking about physical literacy for about the last year, about bringing this to Campbell River. And I want to acknowledge, just so I can, want to acknowledge the work that Principal Nancy Long and Principal Rona Sutar had started years ago. I picked it up about a year and a half ago, and it's come to fruition in our district, and we're really excited about it. We had a competitive process in terms of choosing the person that would lead this in our district, and Georgina was a teacher at Kerry High in both PE and French immersion. She has an athletic therapist diploma. She's got a diploma in PE health and French. She has a master's, just completed it, so that was a long process, just completed it in the summer, around physical literacy development. And so when we look at somebody bringing this to fruition to teachers in our district, Georgina was a great candidate. She's also incredibly passionate about it. Just a reminder to trustees that this position is funded completely by the Ministry of Health as a contracted Sport for Life. So this is something that is a gift to us because the Ministry of Health recognizes that this can make quite a difference for kids, not only now, but down the road. And Georgina's role will be to build capacity of teachers, like all of our other coordinators, to build the capacity of teachers to make an impact on students. So over to you, Georgina, who came back from a few days of training in North Van last week and is excited. So
I know you can't see my smile, but I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. I wanted to share with you tonight what the Sport, Physical Activity, and Physical Literacy Project is, so that you can see and understand a little bit about the work that I'm going to do this year. Just so that you know, just a really quick brief overview, physical literacy is the competence and the confidence that we build in our kids that allows them to have the motivation to be active over the course of a lifetime. It's not about building athletes, it's about building active individuals that they'll engage with activity and find something they enjoy and then continue to engage in this activity so that they remain healthy. But the key to developing lifelong physical literacy is really through the building blocks of what we call fundamental movement skills. And those fundamental movement skills are things like run, jump, throw, catch, balance. And these fundamental movement skills get developed in our early years. And this is what we are looking at. So what will physical literacy look like in our schools? I kind of thought this picture was amazing because it's fun, it's with purpose, it is student-centered and inclusive for all of our students. It's keeping kids moving and active at all opportunities and allowing activities to be progressive and then challenging at the same time. So everybody in our classes can engage with all the different activities that we're going to do. So the project goals that we're looking at, like Morgan said, is building teacher capacity. We're going to look to increase the levels of confidence and competence within our teachers when it comes to physical literacy and physical activity development. We want to increase the knowledge around physical activities and ways to support our students with their mental well-being. We want to increase the knowledge of our Indigenous perspectives in the health and wellness to support our Indigenous students, but in a culturally safe way. And we want to provide a greater number of minutes during the school day where teachers can incorporate physical activity, because even one extra minute is something more that they weren't doing beforehand. What we really want is that it's a smooth transition and that it's something easy for our teachers. We don't want to overload them, we don't want to make it stressful, and we don't want to add more to their plate. And so one of the great things about our project is that we have this massive resource library that's directly linked to physical activities, and there's over 1,000 different types of physical activities that teachers can select that they like, that they can bring to their classroom. So what does our program look like? We're going to be supporting all of the middle and elementary schools in our district, and each teacher that participates receives hands-on learning sessions in the classroom, in the gym, and in the outdoor space with their students. The sessions that we're going to do are going to be uniquely tailored based on the teacher's needs, and they're going to be student-centered based on the types of students that are in their classroom. We're going to look to provide resources and equipment as needed for success, things like decals in the hallways, and paint lines on the floors on the outdoor space. And then physical literacy in a bag, which is just something simple that you can grab and use. It's on the desk over there. Grab and use in your classrooms with all sorts of different types of things. So the program is broken down into 8 different sessions. And our first 2 sessions are meeting with the teacher, understanding what their needs are and where they want to go with the learning, and then assessing where the students are at in their physical literacy development on a 5 kind of activity scale. We're also going to introduce the Play Builder online platform, and I'll speak to that in just a minute. Morgan's holding up my bag, my physical literacy in a bag. Simple tools that you can find at the dollar store type thing that you can pull into your classroom for all sorts of games that you can grab in a minute when you have a lull, that you can that you can pull in, and that you can merge and meld with not just physical activity, but you can build in with literacy and numeracy. So things that you're doing in class can be reinforced with physical activity, and these sort of things can also help children who may be having a tough time settle, burn a little bit of energy, and refocus on what they have to do. And I'll speak to the Play Builder in a minute. Sessions 3 through 8 is that on-the-job, individualized professional development. And we've chatted with the teacher, we know where they're at, but we've also assessed the students and looked at where the need in that particular class is. So we're going to structure the lessons that we do in the class so that the students find success. The teacher learns and the students gain. Physical literacy is not just in the gym. It is in the hallways, it is in the classroom, it's in the outdoor space, it's in the playgrounds. And our learning sessions are all based around these different areas. So we're going to take physical literacy to all aspects of the school. We're going to look at tips and tricks to increase movement time during the day in all areas of the school. And then it's an ongoing continuous support process over the course of the year, and not just ending after these 8 sessions. So one of the great things about our project is this Play Builder resource. It's an online platform which every teacher can have access to. It's free, and it's got all these amazing resources that are downloadable, printable. They're curriculum linked, they're grade-based packed, they're easy games, they're build upon games, and they've got all the lessons plans already developed for teachers. So it's super simple to pick up and go. The other great thing I love about it is that if you're looking at a game, sometimes we don't understand when we read it. We've got video library linked, and it shows you how to play these games, and it shows you how to break them down in the classroom. So it's a really amazing platform to look at. I just put a snapshot in so you could see kind of what it looks like and how it's structured. And if you were to click on one of the icons, the grade 2 physical literacy education plan, it not only gives you lessons for different activities, it will also give you a full year breakdown, and it structures around locomotion, non-locomotor, and manipulative activities. So it takes you through all the different skills that you need over the course of the school year. So it's just a great program. Sport for Life has partnered also with iSpark, which is the Indigenous Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation Council. And iSpark is in the middle of developing Indigenous content for the website, which they are hoping to have up and available to us in the fall. They said sometime in October, I think. And iSpark has this really amazing program called Fitnation, which is being led by a gentleman in Victoria. And it's all about creating activity for people from the young to the elders that everybody can do and requires no equipment. So a really great component that we're going to be able to bring into our classes as well. Our program doesn't stop there. The project also involves all sorts of different professional opportunities that you can engage with. There's Indigenous workshops, e-learning courses that are available, professional development workshops. They offer a summer institute as well. And then there's continuous support from the physical literacy leads across BC. One of the things that we'll put up in our schools is this really great poster so that teachers can pull out their phone really quickly, click on our code there, and you can quickly see that Playbird will pop up and they can pull up a lesson if they need. They've also got access to e-learning courses, and they've got access to different webinars that they can engage with. So it's really an amazing platform and a really great initiative that's happening. Just to wrap it up, the big thing is, well, how does this impact our students' wellness? And that's really what we're looking at, because it's really the student well-being that we feel will be at the forefront of this project. It will help students with the connections in schools. It will help them with their social connections. Really, it's going to help build confidence in self. They are strong and they'll be stronger individuals. They'll feel really great about themselves as they develop the tools they need to learn about for self-regulation and how it comes to movement. And then the big thing is lifelong learning engagement with activities. And these are skills that they will carry with them throughout the course of their life. So a really, really fun project, really a project that I'm super excited about. And questions?
And just before we get to questions,
Sure.
We're looking at how to collect data in terms of the effectiveness and the impact on students' well-being and their learning. We are looking at other districts and have already checked in with other districts. What data were you using? We have access to a woman that is a data specialist that works with UBC who happens to live in Campbell River, and her data collection and getting data points are in physical literacy. So she is going to be working with us as to how do we collect that in Campbell River, again, to completely, as best we can, understand impact. And many of them are stories. It's hard to, put a number to a number of the issues that or points that Georgina has shared. But we are looking to do that as we are in all the areas of coordinated work. I just wanted to add that part in.
Thank you.
Yes, I totally empathize with the difficulty collecting data on life, and oftentimes it is stories and anecdotal information in literacy measurement. As a question, the Sport for Life, I know that the City of Campbell River Parks and Recreation Department has done a similar campaign with community. Is there any intertwining between kind of the messaging in community and the messaging in schools?
Yes, that's one of the partners that I hope to work with this year in connecting with the city, and it's the play program that they run as well. Yes, so we have chatted, and yes, I hope to make that connection.
Awesome.
And further to that, so that is who I've been working with is the district partners, also our health nurse for our area. So the Play Campbell River has a number of components. And we've been working, so they're part of this project. Georgina just hasn't had the opportunity to meet that group, but we meet once a month, and we've been doing that for a year and a half. Awesome. So very, very connected.
Thank you.
Trustee Wilson?
Just on it sounds like a wonderful program, and anything that can be done to make kids enjoy activity as opposed to hypertrophy is, 100%. Just wondering on a very practical note, how are you going to actually roll this out? Will you be focusing on one school at a time, or a grade level at a time, or?
We're going to actually focus on a couple schools at a time, just with the way it rolls out. With the 8 sessions, they don't have to be done back to back. In fact, we like to spread them out a little bit so that it allows people the time to digest and actually use some of the tools. And so we'll do a couple sessions in the beginning, give them a time to go away, practice, see what they like, see what they don't like, make adjustments, and then we'll do another couple sessions. So we hope to do several schools at the same time.
Do you think you'll get to all the schools you want to in 1 year?
I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
I'm really excited about this because I do believe that we need to have this as who we are, not just something, of course, we're putting on. I think it's really important that kids become physically involved in the world around them. And unfortunately, with the use of computers nowadays, we tend to, I see kids walking down the hallways and they've got their devices working, they're not even really paying attention to the world around them. And I think the more alert that we become of our bodies and things that we can actively do, I think it stimulates everything, our minds, our souls. We become involved in the world around us. We start to care about ourselves, and I think we start to care about others. which is really critical, but it has to become who we are as a school district. And I think we can do that. I think that we can get to where we need to be. And again, personal stories, if we look back on our lives, you know, we didn't have much supervision when I was a kid, but boy, I tell you, we were out there every day and running around, and here I am at my age, and I'm still shoveling manure all day long with the horses and keeping busy. And I think that it really keeps your mind active while you're doing other things. And you say, well, instead of hopping in the car, I'd like to just walk over and maybe I'll go out and just kick the ball around with some friends rather than play video games. I'd like to see that in our district, and this would be a good mechanism. I wish you all the best, and I'm excited for you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trustee McMahon.
Hi, well, I would applaud what Trustee Burr said, but I think that the idea, the goal of trying to have children begin to integrate sort of a kinesthetic sense of who they are with the cognitive and the academic side of things, which we have tended to focus on for a generation or two. And, you know, no running in the halls, no be quiet. I think that I think that all of the positive attributes that you pointed out are an important piece of that, knowing, you know, having some joy in how you use your body and being aware of your body being part of. Yeah, I think that's more critical now than ever. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to seeing the result of this. I'm sure you'll come back and let us know how things are going at some point during the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll
Thank
look
you.
forward to it. Thank you very much. Okay, we will move to item 12. Before we get into that, though, I want to ask that, this is the first meeting of the year, so that's enough. I would ask that if you have items for the agenda, we're getting in by Wednesday, so we can talk about, we can have the agenda at the agenda setting meeting. That would be, you know, things do come up on an emergency basis, but if it's possible to have those in for the previous Wednesday, it would be helpful. Okay, so Trustee Hagan, you have an item that you wanted to address.
This is just a small issue, and I think I got it in the fixed scheme. I was in trustee for quite a while, but I'm not on social media, and I don't spend any time on the computer much. But recently, we have a proposal, or I have a proposal with some partners in the Oyster River area, and a lot of things were being said about me personally as far as my activities on the school board goes, particularly with the closure of Oyster River School. And knowing that I have a proposal going forward in the area, I said that it's a conflict of interest. And people are saying, and it's been in the newspaper now, that I actually closed the Oyster River School. And let me clarify that the board acts very professionally. And if we are in a conflict of interest about certain issues, we step back. And I've seen other board members do this as well. And so I would just like to clarify that the Oyster River School stepped back and had no say and wasn't even part of the conversations on why that school should be closed. And I would like that clarified because I'm not on social media, and I would just like to clear up that I had nothing to do with the closure of Oyster River School and don't have an opinion whether or not it should be open or closed because I don't have all the information. And the other little thing that they said was that I actually closed Maple School, which I was the only trustee that voted to keep it open, and I was board chair at the time. So I would just like to ask a clarification, and maybe I should get on social media, but I don't have time for it. To tell you the truth, there's so much misinformation. And if you have something to say about any board member, why don't you look it up first before you start spreading things around.
Thank you for that clarification, Trustee. Okay, we'll move to the next item, that's student leadership, and Trustee McMahon.
In the minutes of our last meeting in June, there was mention of the proposal to meet with the representatives of students that will be participating on the student leadership committee. And I just was wondering if that meeting happened and how it went and whether all the people are lined up and where we go from here.
Yeah, we had a meeting in June. I can't remember how many students were there. It was online.
Yeah, there was not full complement. We had 2 people from each of the 5 schools, so a total of 10 students. But not all of them were there that day.
Had a good discussion about the future, what we would be talking about, and we didn't have any actionable things that we just planned to meet again in the future. I think sometime in September or October after they got back to school and got back into the thick of it. And
So there'll be a date set in the next couple of weeks of when the first meeting will take place with them.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we move on to the education issues, and we'll have Superintendent informing us about our updated COVID protocol for 2022. And
Paul Reed.
thanks.
I didn't know if we should come up here or stay back there, so thank you. I wanted to introduce our Supervisor of Operations and Safety, Paul Reed. On August 24th, the BCCDC issued.
You're not on camera.
you're not in camera, yeah.
People don't need to see my bald spot, Paul, you can go over there. Issued guidance, and the Ministry of Education issued new protocols for the K-12 setting. And although there were differences related to some of the mitigation strategies, it's really important to note that the fundamental or the key mitigation strategies have remained the same. Those include mask wearing for all adults entering the building, students in grades 4 to 12, daily health checks, ensuring people, whether it's staff or students, stay home when they're ill, respiratory and hand hygiene etiquette, and enhanced cleaning. And one of the protocols that's changed, and I just want to note, is the removal of cohorts. And even though we don't have formal cohorts, our district is well poised to pivot if necessary. And a prime example are our secondary schools, where many school districts in the province have gone back to a full semester system. We transitioned from a 1/8 model, 1 class at a time, to a quarter model of 2 classes at a time. And even though it's not officially a cohort, it's still less in numbers than the cohort model that existed last June. So we're very well poised to pivot if we need to. And I know the cohort change was one of those things that many families expressed concern about. Whether it's elementary, middle, or secondary, we are well poised to adjust if necessary. So for the technical aspects of some of the changes, I'll just have Paul talk to them.
Great, I'll kind of step into the camera here. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. Paul Reed, the Supervisor of Operations and Safety. So some of the technical things we look at is we actually do have a pandemic committee. And on that pandemic committee, we have both unions are supported, and we also have senior management and of course health and safety. And we're able to look at all the updates that we get from the Ministry of Education and Island Health, and are able to make the right decisions to make our staff and our students are supported. The one other area we look at too is joint occupational health and safety committees. Traditionally, those are more to do with legislation and staff, but actually it's a good tool that we use within our sites at schools to deal also with student safety. So it could be cases as much as students moving around the school, going to a library, going into a gym. Rather than have a lot of people back up, we put things in like motion testless dispensers. You can put your hands on, clean, and carry on with all those different routines. And as Jeremy kind of pointed out earlier, we responded extremely well to COVID. We've had great support from the board. You know, things like barriers have all been in place for probably close to 18 months now. all our sanitizing units, of course, our healthcare checks on a regular basis. And again, masks being worn in all areas. So again, it's been a great strength of our district to be well supported by the board and by the committees that we work with. Great. Did anyone have any questions?
Can I just add a couple of things? One of the other areas that people have been asking about is ventilation. And so I just wanted to touch base. It's important to understand the different types of air handling units. One is a fresh air unit that pulls air from outside. The other is a recycled system, a recycled air system. All our schools have a fresh air system. And so that ensures that we can control the amount of fresh air that comes in. There's been a lot of talk about filters, and there's been talk about MERV 13 filters. Those are focused for recycled air filters. Our schools have a minimum of MERV 10 filters. And just to put it into context so people understand, a MERV 10 filter is a filter that will be in place for a hospital lab. A MERV 13 filter will be a filter that's in place for surgery or where hospital patients are. So even our lowest filter is hospital laboratory quality. But our district, even though we have fresh air handler units, we're still committed to moving to the MERV 13 filter because we want to be ahead of the minimum standard. And that's a commitment our board has made over the last 2 years. And as a district, we're committed to that because the science is changing. And so we don't want to always be at the minimum level. We want to be ahead of the game. So our district is committed to that. And with our air systems, we're starting them sooner. And that's going to purge the air out in the morning so there's increased fresh air, increased oxygen, and lower CO2 levels. And it may come up later, and I think it's important to note that unlike in previous years, all these mitigation pieces, like increased filters, this past week, we sent out 5,000 reusable masks for students, 1,000 masks for teachers, plus the numerous disposable masks. To this point, for this school year, that's all unfunded from the province. And the commitment from the board to make sure student safety is a priority has been wonderful. This board from the get-go has always said student and staff safety first. So I thank you for that. It's made our job easier that we know that safety is the #1 concern of this board. And so we're very fortunate as a district that we've been able to be ahead of the game, ahead of the minimum standard. So we cannot just think about now, we're thinking about the future. So thank you for your commitment over the last 2 years for that.
You ready for questions?
Sure.
Trustee Hagan?
I can't underline enough what purposeful spending means in a district like this. Is people ask me quite often, well, what are you doing about the whole COVID issue? And it seems like, what we're doing is, this is purposeful spending on behalf of the board, where we have to say, we get a certain amount of money from the government in our ongoing budget process, but we're spending beyond that. We have reserves, and we've decided that this is important so we can get on with the job of educating kids in the classroom and remove the risk factors. Hopefully that parents can feel a little better about having their kids in the school, because we've spent, I think later on it'll come up in our budget, how much extra we're actually spending so that kids can be safe, so that we can get on with our job. And I appreciate all the work that's going on. It's not just money, but it's people's attitudes, it's the meeting with various groups, and then again, looking ahead, which is what we are really thankful for our people who are in charge, is to have a vision to say, it's not good enough just to do the minimum, that we'd rather spend the money now up front and filter the air and do all that we can purposely so that we can make things safe for kids. When this all started a couple of years ago, I said that we would walk side by side with parents, and I hope that parents feel that way, that our board is working side by side with you, whatever your opinions may be, that we're working hard to make it safe for kids, for employees, and that the kids feel safe to come and learn, because that's what our job is. Anyway, I thought I'd mention and say thank you for all the hard work that you've done throughout the summer to get us to where we are now, so that when kids arrive in the classroom, it's going to be a better place for them.
Trustee Eddie?
I'd like to echo Trustee Hagan's thanks in the work that you've done navigating the different health orders as they've come down to meet the needs of students and to give our parents some confidence in the ability of our school district to protect their kids in a time that's fraught with differences of opinions and different changes. I'm very proud to say that we're a steady force as a school district in the safety of our kids and providing education. So thanks for your work, guys.
Okay, well,
Great,
thank you, Mr. Lee.
great, thank you.
Associate Superintendent Susan. I'm sure the other questions will come up at some point that you'll be called upon to answer. Okay, we'll move on then to the next item, and the finance warrant number 6. And I'll ask for a motion. The suggested motion is that the finance warrant number 6 dated June 30, 2021 be accepted as presented. Trustee Hagan, Trustee Franklin. Is there any discussion or comment on that? Okay, Trustee, sorry.
Secretary Treasurer Patrick, you're on.
Did that one pass?
We
That
need to
motion?
vote.
Okay, I'm wondering if you had to say something. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Okay, the motion is carried.
Okay.
Are you going to address this one or the next one?
So I am next on the agenda as well.
Yes.
With the schedule of reserves. And I am just going to bring up the reserve. So we are nearing the end of the financial statements from the 2021 school year. Our new Assistant Secretary Treasurer has worked hard all summer, going through the financial statements, getting them ready, and which has given us the information. So I have to thank her. She's done a wonderful job. First time through the summer, and it's a huge undertaking, and she did it with flying colors. And as part of that, before we bring the financial statements to the board for them to be passed, we usually ask the board to go through the schedule of reserves and approve reserves that are going to be included as part of the notes. So with reserves, the board through the years has built a surplus, and as part of that surplus, the board can identify certain items that are internally restricted. And it, so as those items get restricted, we can include them in the notes, and it really shows the public that that there's plans for that. Like, it's not just a $4 million surplus, potentially could be spent in the next year. So we take the opportunity at this time to bring things forward to the board. Now, there is a surplus policy that tries to guide staff and the board on what these reserves can be used for. And so some of the general guidelines are that they should be shorter term or one-time items. That there's an item that says that they should be for emergent or urgent items, that they can be used for unspent money for some programs,
What this doesn't do is it's not meant to replace the budget process. We have a very a deep conversation and seek feedback from various stakeholders for budget. And that's what the board goes through and management go through in the spring. So as we go through, you'll get a bit of an idea as to some of the things that that we look for. So financial performance, as I said, next board meeting, we're going to get more into the details in the financial performance. But the big thing that impacts this step is we ended the year with a $1.2 million deficit. If the board had have spent all of the appropriations and the operating deficit, it would have been about a $3.2 million deficit. So we as a school district did better than that. There was also a planned operating deficit of 1.3 million, so we came in slightly less than that. And what that does is it has the effect of reducing the surplus or the reserve from $5.8 million down to $4.5 million. So, so it's a big reduction, but it was planned. The surplus, though, has two components to it. It's got a restricted portion and an unrestricted portion. The unrestricted portion is important because in spring, when we look at creating a preliminary budget for the next year, another item in the surplus policy allows the board to use 1/3 of that unrestricted to help balance the budget. So the benefit to that is it helps smooth some of the changes in both expenses and revenue changes year to year, so that it's not a solid drop of $1 million if expenses go up or if revenues drop. So it helps smooth out some of those changes by averaging things out. So the process that this happens is when we find out basically last week what the deficit is going to be and what the reserves are going to be, management will get together, review the existing reserves, also consider new reserves, so emergent type items, and then bring them forward as a proposal to the board. If the board passes them tonight, then we include them in the notes and bring them forward again at the next board meeting. So the first item that we have that I'd like to talk about is school growth. Now this is actually one of the items that's not in compliance with the surplus policy of the board, because this has come repeatedly over the past 15 years. And staff have been trying to, and the board has been working over the last couple of years to take some of these items that recurred frequently and move them into the operating budget. In the prior year, 2 years ago, we were able to move 175,000 for learning resources over, some training items, some health and safety items came off of this and moved over. But last year was a very difficult budget year. Heading into this, and this 21-22 was also a difficult budget year, so it wasn't possible at that time to address this. So we're asking or proposing for the upcoming year to have another $100,000 in addition to the annual allocation. The next item, international program. So our international program tends to run a bit of a surplus, and going from year to year, there's various plans that they need to make early in the year before the year starts. So it has always been beneficial for them to have a surplus here, just for the planning for the next year. The other benefit that this surplus, that this item has for the international program is in a, for a pandemic year where revenues unexpectedly drop, they can lean on some of these reserves here to help support the program. So again, they don't need to very immediately mid-year cut and reduce expenses. So they had about 250,000 left over. We did need to redirect some of that money. So we're proposing a reserve of 207,000. Surplus required to balance the budget. So this was the 1/3 of $2 million from last year. So the target for the board to balance this year was 680,000 deficit, so a loss for the year. And again, it does allow the board to help kind of manage some of the changes, the reductions. It did allow a little bit of spending for the needs at the time, and that's part of that very thorough feedback process. Operational needs and contingency reserve. So last year, I believe for the final budget for the 2021, COVID was a significant concern and unknown. We did receive some funding for COVID expenses, but we didn't know if that was going to cover all. It didn't entirely, and the board had talked about using the emergency contingency to cover a portion of that. So with a $1.2 million deficit, we didn't need to lean into it, but that emergency contingency is there. That's kind of like the last safety net. So if by any chance there was a big $1 million loss, the first place that we would go is the unrestricted reserve. But if all of that is gone, the board can lean on the operational emergency contingency. And you know, for trustees around long enough, there was a point in time where the Ministry of Education cut our AFG funding mid-year, full stop, $1 million was lost. So the board had to rely on reserves, and the board also had to reduce. So with an emergency contingency, if that were to happen again, it could support that program for that year. School supply accounts. So this is one of those things that does show up each year, but this one, basically with our schools, they receive the monies, but they do a lot of their ordering and purchasing over summer to try to get supplies in for September. So if they know some of what they have left over in June as they put their orders in, but the supplies don't arrive until July, August. And so this way they know that they've got the money to cover some of those orders. So we allow the schools to carry forward some of their unspent monies year to year for that planning. Indigenous program. Indigenous funding is fully targeted, and it has to be spent on Indigenous programs. Anything not spent needs to be saved for the next year. This is the only item that actually needs to be, that is endorsed by the Ministry of Education to be a restricted reserve. The others generally are up to the board to approve, but this is one that they officially endorse and say must be restricted if it is unspent year to year. IT equipment. So we undertook a really big IT plan a couple of years ago, and it was millions of dollars to refresh and get everything up to a certain standard for our IT tech. One of that component is the board did increase the annual contributions to IT at that time, but the understanding was that those funds would prevent the district from having to come to the board again to ask for $2 million to refresh again at a future time. So in order to do that, as that annual allocation and IT spends, each year they need to basically save a portion for that refresh. So rather than buying computers that maybe aren't needed in year 1 or 2, they're taking the money and they're saving it for that year 4 purchase. So as you can see, they're getting very close to needing to refresh. So this is sort of the venue. This is the venue for them to do that, to be able to evergreen the equipment. Lawnmower deck. So this was actually identified last year and supported by the board. The order went in, unfortunately, with everything backlogged. It's not getting delivered till, I believe, right around now. So they've ordered it, committed to it, purchase order's gone out, but we haven't paid for it. So we're asking for the board to support so we can pay for that. So renovations for this room here. This is a very highly used room. Multi-purpose room. It's used for a lot of meetings, principal meetings, staff functions, tenant functions here, community functions, and obviously tonight it's used for a board meeting. So we're hoping to invest some money to make it a bit more functional for the purposes that it's used, as well as update it a little bit. There's also going to be some money identified in a local capital that we'll be able to use as well. So this is part of it. The local capital contributes part of it. But that's actually still just the first phase because this project will take a couple steps to get to conclude. COVID expenses. So right now, there is no indication that the board's going to get any funding from any government, federal or provincial, to cover COVID expenses. But the expectation is that some of the things in place last year will continue. So we are asking for some money for certainty so that we can continue to do that. So right now, this includes this COVID expense item. It may vary a little bit, but it's intended to cover daytime cleaning at schools. It's going to cover masks, the MERV 13 filters that are being ordered. It will cover some of the supervision as well that allowed some of the flexibility for staggered lunches. And it, again, we're hopeful that we will get further funding and maybe we won't need to use this. At this point, I anticipate that without further funding, our expenses will likely exceed this. As Associate Superintendent Sismek pointed out, just the energy costs alone increase will likely more than cover this. But again, we do know these expenses are going to be in place, and we're hoping for the board to support some funds to cover those items. Phoenix totem rebuild. So there was a totem at Phoenix, 25 years, I believe, 20 to 25 years. We were hoping to refurbish it last year, but found that it actually needed to be replaced. So there's a couple different sources coming together to contribute portions of it. And the school has asked the district to cover this portion of the totem rebuild. So we are proposing that as well. And then the last item is Cedar Fence for some safety purposes. So generally the new additions will have lots of equipment, lots of vans, and we felt that this year we kind of had to scale it back quite a bit because this is going to take the unrestricted reserve. Last year was at 2 million. The unrestricted reserve, if these proposals are accepted, will be 1.3. The total surplus last year was 5.8, and it'll be 4.5. The internally restricted ones last year were about 3.8, and they're down at 3.2. So we kind of cut back on both components of that, trying to be a little more conservative with some of the commitments. So today, if the board supports, we'll look for a motion to support this, and we will include it into the statements, finished statements that you'll see next board meeting. Are there any questions?
Before we go to the motion, for Trustee Meddy and then Trustee Davis.
So Secretary Treasurer Patrick, I have a question about the tech plan.
Mm-hmm.
From our policy, you're recommending that we should be moving the school growth $100,000 into our operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
With the tech replacement budget, I'm assuming that that's going to be an ongoing cost as technology continues to march forward. What's the process for moving like a standardized IT purchasing budget into the operating budget?
So it actually has. So I should clarify, there's two components. So the school growth would actually spend everything in their annual allocation and then would need more from the board. So really, that's why it needs to be rolled into the annual, because their annual was $100,000, but they'd spend $150,000 or $200,000. So this point was the board actually adding 100, or last year it was $150,000 so that they could meet the commitments, which really puts that all the programs supported by that at risk, because if 1 year the board doesn't do that, they have to cut back. What's happening with, say, the school supply accounts, the Indigenous program, the international program, and the IT, is they actually underspend their annual. So the IT budget's $300,000. This past year, they spent $200,000 on purpose to save that $100,000 for a future need. So they are different. The top up, if you will, That's what's intended to be rolled into the, and that's not in compliance with the policy. But the unspent amount for tech, this is the right venue. And the other reason and benefit that this is the right place is it's a public statement. So, you know, if our budget process says 300,000 is going into tech, are we getting $300,000 worth of equipment that year? No. So this will point out that this past year, 100,000 was saved for a future year. So this is a nice sort of public component to supporting and keeping it transparent of what's actually happening.
Thank you.
Behaving.
So altogether, then, the amount that's coming out of our reserves this year, is that, I try to keep up with them now, is it about 1.2 million that we're going down from the previous year?
Correct.
And following up on that, then, we protected COVID expenses that we're talking about, the filters, the barriers, everything that we've been putting in there. What kind of mechanism do we have to lobby the federal and the provincial government, who I would think that this is a provincial issue and a federal issue? What kind of lobbying can we do on behalf of this so that we can take that kind of money that we're spending here, which we purposely are doing, and so that we can spend it back in the classroom or classroom initiatives and educational issues rather than COVID expenses? I know that it costs money, but I'm thinking if there's ever a federal issue or a provincial issue, this is one. And is there something that we can do to lobby these governments, or is there something that's going on right now between the different departments and lobbying them and saying, you know, we need to cover these costs?
At this point, I'm unaware of any formal lobbying or conversations or considerations for future or further funding. So I would suggest the board communicate with the Ministry of Ed, pointing out the cost pressures that the board's currently facing.
Last thing, perhaps we should do that with our communications. Is put a request forward and say, listen, this is the time to step up.
You prepared to make a motion to that effect?
I thought there was other questions going on, but I could perhaps at the end.
Just to follow on from where Trustee Hagan was, what was the federal grant last year for mitigating COVID?
So the federal grant was substantial. It started out just under 2 and it ended up just over $2 million for our district.
So last year, the federal government allocated approximately $2 million for COVID mitigation during a period when there was no Delta variant and the disease was far less communicable. This year, nothing. How about the provincial government?
Provincial government had $460,000 was provided to the district.
So $460,000 was provided. So when you say that we're asking the board to use $170,000, but the cost may exceed, it's pretty likely that it is going to exceed, considering that we've got $2,460,000 less this year to mitigate COVID-19 in this one school district. To me, it's absolutely astonishing that the federal government chose last year to give us $2 million to help mitigate COVID, but nothing this year. It's astonishing to me. And so I'm following up on your suggestion, Darryl. I move that communication committee prepare strongly worded letters to both the federal and provincial government to maintain at least last year's level of funding to mitigate COVID-19 in our school districts.
Okay, Trustee Hagan, I'm assuming you're seconding that motion? Is there any discussion on it? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Okay. It's carried. So we'll go back then to item 14B. So further discussion on the schedule of reserves. Mr. Franklin.
I move approval.
Okay, so the suggested motion is that the 2020-2021 schedule of internally restricted reserves is accepted as presented, moved by Trustee Franklin, seconded by Trustee McMahon. Is there any further discussion? Trustee Hagan.
I know there's a lot of thought behind all of these proposals. It's outside the budget process. And as issues arise, I am impressed with our senior management team that is able to focus in on the things that we need at hand. Like the long-term for the work that they have been doing and presenting it to us in a very understandable and comprehensive way.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. All right, we shall move on into item 15, committee reports. And this has to do with Cedar Elementary replacement. Good history. Early this year, the Cedar Replacement Committee was formed, and it consists of Trustee Franklin, Trustee McMahon, and me. And we've had Superintendent Morrow and our Manager of Communications, Ms. Patrick, working with us to get ready. We put together a lot of information. Ms. Patrick has put together some really fantastic materials. There's a handout, there was a letter, there was a video that people will see very shortly. We met with our MLA at the end of June, to talk to her about what we had to do to have this process go ahead, and she made several suggestions, including writing a letter to the Minister of Education, making our case for replacement for Cedar School. That letter was sent in the middle of July. We have not heard anything back from the minister, so last week I was in contact with MLA Babchuk's office and spoke with their administrative assistant. They've gotten onto it, and they've been in contact with the Minister of Education's office, and our MLA is having a meeting with the minister next Monday to put forth our case and also to advocate for a meeting between the committee and the Minister of Education. We won't know how that comes out until after next Monday. This afternoon, Superintendent Morrow and I met with Chief Roberts and Chief Chikite of the two First Nations in whose territory we are, and we updated them, gave them a heads up on what was happening and the fact that we were going to be working on a campaign in the community to advocate for the replacement of Cedar School. They were receptive, but that's as far as it goes, because really, until we have some indication that something is going to happen from the minister, there's no point in us going any further in that direction. So that's where we are. Tomorrow, or sometime this week, the campaign will start to be rolled out. If you haven't seen the materials already, you will see the materials very shortly. And I really want to thank Ms. Patrick for the fantastic work that she's done on putting together a case for the replacement of Cedar School. It's a very professional presentation. So I'm looking forward to seeing and hoping that the community sees it as being as important as our board does. Because, as I said in my remarks, for more than 6 years, we've had this at the top of our capital list, our wish list for things to happen in the district, and nothing is, for schools in the district, nothing has happened to this point. So we're hoping that we can get some movement, and perhaps somewhere down the road, and we can get moving, and somewhere down the road, we can have a replacement for Cedar School, a modern facility that reflects what we say is our vision plus the input of other partners, if it's okay to go ahead. I'll ask Trustee McMahon, Trustee Franklin, Superintendent Morrow, and also Manager of Communications Patrick, if you have anything else to add to that.
I would just like to say to the people of Campbell River, when you see the materials coming out in the newspaper and on hopefully social media, Facebook, that you'll support School District 72 in our effort to have Cedar School rebuilt, and you can support us with letters and phone calls to the Ministry of Education, and there's also MLA, who I know is also very supportive of replacing this school. But we need to somehow impress upon the Minister of Education that, yeah, okay, you need to be building schools down in Surrey where it's growing, but this school needs to be replaced. It's too old. It's not a good place for kids, as good as it could be, and we need a much better, a nice, clean, safe place for kids to go to school. And but it's a squeaky wheel that gets the grease, and Campbell River needs to be a very squeaky wheel to get the attention of the Minister of Education, because right now we are being studiously ignored.
I don't have much to add to what Trustee Franklin has said. I think I would encourage people to look at the website, SD72 website, and scroll down to get the information that they need to adequately advocate. And it doesn't take a minute to print out the letter and put a stamp on it. And as you said, the more letters, the more clout.
I don't think there is that if you send a letter to the.
When it's in session, that's true. I think you're right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I would like to point out that this facility was built, well, the oldest part of it was built more than 60 years ago, and the newest part of it was built almost 60 years ago. The children in that area, the children in our school deserve proper and modern learning conditions. Cedar School is not. And maintenance has been doing a yeoman job in maintaining that facility, despite its age. And the staff in that school are doing fantastic things for the education of their students. And I think it's only right that we provide a good facility for that education and learning to carry on. Did anybody else have any?
I think I would just add just that sentiment that that the school itself, what a wonderful culture, what a positive learning environment for our students, and I think one of the trustees said it really well. It's got a beautiful heart. It just needs to upgrade its body, and so it is a wonderful school with wonderful people in it, and simply put, it just needs a new physical space.
Any other comments? Okay. Any other business? Oh, Trustee Hagan.
I just want to make a quick comment. On the way here today, I struck close down, and I was so surprised at how aggressive drivers can be, and how it seems to be that we are getting a little angry with each other, and perhaps it's not necessary. COVID is not what we expected. We didn't expect it as a district or as a nation. But, you know, that's just the way it is. I don't want to talk about myself too much, but I tried out for the Olympic team in high jumping when I was a kid here in Campbell River, and I didn't expect to lose a leg and a bunch of toes on the other foot. It's not what I expected, but it's what I have. And COVID right now is what we have, and we have to reach within ourselves and say our mental health and well-being has to start to reflect a sense of positive joy, because we actually have it really good in Campbell River. We have a good healthcare system. We have a great school district. And you know what, on the whole, I think we're all trying to do the best that we can. I don't want everyone to hold hands and share their experience, and we're not all going to agree on what's going on. But I think that we need to, as a district, is to say, we have to look out for the well-being of everyone around us and look for joy. It's not happiness, it's a sense of well-being that comes from our very soul. And things start to get us down, wear us down. COVID, I am not going to let this beat me. I'm going to let it beat this district. We're going to walk side by side with parents. And we're going to do the best that we can in circumstances that we have, because it's not to be expected, but we're going to make the best of it.
Thank you. And we'll move to the final item on the agenda. Are there any questions from, I guess, from the ether out there?
So Trustee Kerr, the question and answer function has been open through the entire meeting, and there has been no public questions that have come in as of yet on the agenda items.
Okay, so we give it another minute or two, just to be totally sure that nobody misses a chance to pose a question that's important to them. Nothing more?
No. Nothing has come in.
All right. Trustee Taylor? All those in favor?
Oh, wow.